Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Stephen Hunt. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial is a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant John Burke. John Burke was born to John and Mary Burke in the northern English town of Jarrow-on-Tyne, about February 1874. He attended school in Jarrow before immigrating to New South Wales at a young age. In Australia, John trained as a carpenter and builder. He worked in Sydney and on rural stations in northern New South Wales. He served in a colonial artillery battery for 3 years in the 1890s, and about 1905 began a relationship with a woman named Annie. The pair lived together but did not marry. In December 1915, Burke travelled from the station where he was working to the town of Narrabri and volunteered for service in the Australian Imperial Force. Then, 41 years of age, the recruiting officer describing his complexion as grizzled with iron grey hair. Burke joined the newly raised 34th Australian Infantry Battalion. After initial training in Australia, the battalion sailed from Sydney on board the transport ship Hororata in early May 1916. The unit continued training in England and sailed to France in November. While in England, Burke attended training to become a cook for the battalion and was promoted in January 1917 to the rank of sergeant. The winter of 1916 to 1917 was the coldest in decades in northern France. The men of the 34th Battalion spent time in billets near the city of Armentières, close to the Belgian border. The unit also spent time in frontline trenches. No major battles took place during the winter, but while in the trenches, the men endured German artillery barrages, snipers, machine gun fire, gas attacks, and raiding patrols. In the middle of 1917, British commanders turned their attention away from the Somme River sector and towards the Franco-Belgian border. They planned a major offensive aimed at capturing the higher ground outside the town of Ypres in Belgium. The first step in this campaign was to be the capture of the ridgeline outside the town of Messines. In preparation for the assault on Messines, British, Canadian and Australian soldiers had dug mines underneath the German positions and filled them with explosives. Before dawn on the 7th of June 1917, these explosives were detonated and the Allied soldiers charged the German lines. The 34th Battalion captured their objectives during the battle. The men were then subjected to a German artillery barrage over the next 3 days before they were relieved. During July, the battalion remained in occupation of the Messines battlefield. The German shelling of the area continued, and the battalion's war diary noted large numbers of German aircraft bombing the Australian trenches. On the 20th of July 1917, Burke was struck in the head by a fragment, probably from an artillery shell or an aerial bomb, and badly wounded. He was evacuated to a casualty clearing station, but died of his wounds the next day. John Burke was 43 years old. He was buried in Trois-Arbres Cemetery in northern France, alongside the graves of about 1,700 British and Commonwealth soldiers. Burke was survived in Australia by his widow Annie. She chose the inscription for his headstone, "The noble ending of an unselfish life." Sergeant John Burke is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant John Burke, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.